Of all ideologies, fascism has probably the most interesting origins. It is interesting for so many reasons. It was a unique social phenomena that went against any expectations at the time, and to some extent, even modern expectations. For this reason, many people then and now fail to fully understand it. I hope that this video will at least make you think about fascism not only as an evil ideology, but also as a mix of many other ideologies at their worst form and applied in the worst scenario in history possible. This is the origins of fascism. Hello guys and welcome back. This is going to be an experimental sort of video, but I hope you will enjoy. Let's start right away by talking about Italy in the First World War. World wars are never very fun, especially if you lose. Luckily, Italy was one of the winners. But sadly, things are not so simple, and Italy's victory was, as they said at the time, a mutilated victory. Let me explain. Back in 1879, Italy signed a defensive alliance with Germany and Austria. Over the years, Italy drifted apart from these countries. When Giolitti took Crispi's place in 1898, Italy's stance on many things such as expansion and economy changed, and the national interest pushed Italy closer to France and England in terms of foreign policy. There were also tensions between Austria and Italy, since Italian nationalists looked at Austrian territories such as South Tyrol and Dalmatia as potential expansion grounds. So by the time that 1914 rolled around, no one really wanted to go to war against France, England and Russia. Luckily for Italy, the treaty that tied them with the Central Powers was a defensive alliance, and since technically Germany and Austria declared war to Russia, Italy didn't have to join. Therefore, they stayed neutral for the first year of the war. Giolitti knew that after the Italo-Turkish War, Italy wouldn't have been able to do well against other European countries, and he did his best to keep Italy out of the conflict. Nevertheless, 1915 was a weird year for Italy, full of political tension. The Giolitti era had just ended, opening to a power vacuum in the parliament, and the global conflict became the focus of most of political divisions. The right, led by Antonio Salandra, wanted to join the war because they wanted the expansion and the national prestige that came with it. The left, on the other hand, still led by Giolitti, were more interested on recovering from the Italo-Turkish War and the well-being of their voters, the working classes. Therefore, the last thing they wanted was average workers from all around Europe, from many different countries, slaughtering each other in a battlefield at their expense. Among the ones against war was Mussolini. That was until he changed his mind, but we will talk about that later. As you may already know, Italy joined the war at the end of 1915 because Antonio Salandra, Giolitti's historical rival, was able to win the prime minister position by accusing the left of being unpatriotic. They joined the side of the Allies, who had promised Italy South Tyrol and Trieste. Italy focused most of the war efforts on the Austrian front, and Italy took a huge loss on the war, especially at the start. After the Battle of Caporetto, which was a huge disaster, Salandra had to resign, giving the position to another right-winger, Vittorio Orlando, a more moderate version of himself. Regardless of the mess, they pulled through, and by the time of 1918, the Italian army was able to conquer South Tyrol all by himself. When the war was over, Woodrow Wilson, David Lloyd George and Giorgio Clemenceau and Vittorio Orlando met in Paris to decide the fate of Europe and to withdraw the spoils of war. These four world leaders are usually called the Big Four. However, here's a fun fact. Most of the American history books I have come across only talk about the Big Three. Let's play a game. Which world leader do you think they left out? If you chose Orlando, then congratulations, you are the smartest man in front of your computer screen. Now, what did Orlando do? Well, it's complicated. Orlando, unlike his winner friends, came to the conference with his foreign minister Sidney Sonnino, and these two didn't go along very much. Orlando at first just wanted to go there, have a nice time, get Trieste and South Tyrol, and shake the other world leaders, and then just go home and chill. But Sonnino was having none of that, and he wanted the whole of Dalmatia. At first Orlando was like, Sonnino, that's a stupid idea, they would never agree to give us the whole of Dalmatia. But Sonnino was like, well, if you don't do that, I will tell my friends you picked your nose in the train and then you put pineapple on pizza. I don't expect you guys to understand, but in Italy that's some serious threat. At the end, Orlando went to the conference and acted like a moron. He asked Wilson and again for Dalmatia to be added to his loot, to which the three laughed at him and he started crying like a 5-year-old. Wilson even accused Orlando of not representing the Italian people, but rather his personal ambition. Orlando resigned out of shame shortly after. No wonder everyone wanted to forget about him. Now, Italy was in a crap ton of trouble, and people were mad. They blamed the Italian government for not getting all the promised lands in the deal, and many people took Russia as an example, thinking that a socialist revolution was just around the corner. Then all of a sudden, the Red Years began. The Red Years was a 2-year period between 1919 and 1920 where socialist groups got a lot of popularity and they constantly fought against the state army trying to start a revolution. During this time, socialist intellectual Giuseppe D'Annunzio got tired of the lack of results and so he assembled a group of 1,000 volunteers and conquered the city of Trieste all by himself, just because. He was kicked out 1 year later, but many look at D'Annunzio's way of governing the city as the best form of socialism. I should definitely make a video about it one day, because it definitely deserves more screen time. Anyway, it was anything but a peaceful time in Italian history, but things only got worse from here. Remember Mussolini? Yeah, the young socialist I mentioned a bunch of times. I know he may seem not very important on the surface, but listen up. In 1915, he was part of the socialists and was against the war in general. But then he started thinking how cool it would be if Italy actually had some extra lands. Think about it, guys, the workers would fight together for the thing all of them have in common, patriotism. And with that they would show the world that Italy is the best country in Europe, and then all the workers will be happy. As you may expect, he was kicked out of the Socialist Party for showing any sign of nationalism, and so he made a new political group, the Fascists. Mussolini was the first politician ever to mix socialism and nationalism, and while it had a weak start, it caught the attention of the right wing when during the Red Years it became common to see gangs of fascists ambushing socialists who disagreed with them. These opened up negotiations and even an alliance between the fascists and the right wing. Remember, at this time the fascists still saw themselves as socialists, or anarchists, or at least radical leftists. By the time of 1921, the fascists not only had grown a lot as a movement, but they also adopted many right-wing ideas, such as traditional gender roles, religion, imperialism, and other things conservatives liked. This was how fascism came to be, and that same year Mussolini turned his movement into a real party and ran for elections. He did get a fair amount of votes, but the fascists also used fear tactics to force people to vote for them. By 1922, the fascists had a good portion of influence in the parliament, but it was not enough for Mussolini. He needed to get harsher. Therefore, he started taking over cities and towns by literally sending fascist guerrillas against the town garrisons and police. In October 1922, Mussolini organized the March to Rome, where thousands of fascists met in Naples to literally march to Rome to symbolically conquer it. While there are some speculations that Mussolini didn't actually march together with his followers, but actually took a train to Rome, his march was actually a success, and it scared the king to the point of actually giving him the title of prime minister. The decision was rushed also by Antonio Salandra himself, who for years had now been supporting the fascist party to some degree. Mussolini took his new title as prime minister as a chance to mess around with the Italian system, slowly making it in his own way and getting rid of all the people he disagreed with. One of his first laws was to outlaw communism and to pass the Acerbo law, which stated that any group that gets a majority of the seats will then get 60% of them if they receive at least 75% of all the total votes. He also founded the Great Fascist Council, which would act as a third part of the Italian parliament, together with the Senate and the House of Delegates, meaning that any law proposal the parliament wanted to pass had to go through a room full of fascists before becoming a law. By the time the new elections of 1924 came around, Mussolini was able to win in a landslide again through threats of violence, and he was finally able to get the majority of the seats in parliament. Many non-fascist politicians were unsure about him and his legitimacy, but all came loose when Giacomo Matteotti, socialist delegate, spoke against Mussolini's violent course of actions. He was then kidnapped and killed by Mussolini's men shortly after. Mussolini came out clean when he addressed Matteotti's accident in front of the parliament, claiming to be fully responsible of what happened. By doing this, he asserted dominance over the whole of Italy and basically said, "Yes, I did it, what are you gonna do about it?" Many of his opponents resigned in protest, but that only allowed him to put more fascists into office. And that was when Mussolini basically took over Italy and started turning it into his fascist wet dream. Well, yeah, now it wasn't too hard, wasn't it? Now follow me next time and I will explain how our boy Mussolini turned the Kingdom of Italy into the fascist state we all are familiar with today.